And we are live, virtually connecting from Lillehammer this morning, this afternoon, this evening, depending where you are. I'm Ken Bauer, your virtually connecting buddy, and we have Frederick over there in Lillehammer to introduce their side of the connection.
I think I'll let people do their own introductions. Just very briefly, I'm Frederick Graver. I'm the Dean of the Norwegian Film School, and we've been hosting this conference for European and international film schools. And
hi, I'm Anel Preminger from Sapir Academic College from Israel.
And I'm Bert Baines. I'm chair of JECT, the European Film School Organization, and I'm working in the RITS, which is the Royal Institute for Theatre, Cinema and Sound in Brussels, Belgium.
I'm Francisco Menendez, originally from El Salvador. I'm the past president of the University Film and Video Association. I'm the artistic director of the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and I'm on the board of CNA, Select North America.
Excellent. I quickly introduce myself. I'm Ken Bauer, computer science professor. I'm not a photographer or a filmographer or anything like that, but I'm an educator, so I've been following what's going on in Padlet, and it's been very interesting. I'll let the others introduce themselves. We'll go with Mia, then Joe, then Claudia, and then Michael.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mia Zamora. I teach both literature and writing at Kean University, which is in New Jersey. Next year, I'm excited to say that I'll be living in Bergen. I'll be a Fulbright scholar there at the University of Bergen in the Department of Digital Culture.
welcome.
I'm Joe Murphy. I'm the director of the Center for Innovative Pedagogy at Kenyon College in Gambier, Ohio, USA. So I do faculty development, and a lot of my interests are in that, both that we've got a new film major in our drama department, and we've got a lot of interest in media making outside the film program, and some of my interests are how we make sure that those two different tracks are informing each other.
Hi, I'm Claudia. I'm the
Frederick, no?
oh, Frederick. Sorry.
Adelante, Clau. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm the promotion coordinator here at the CCC, and actually we're in the Sala de Juntas. And here are three professors, if I can briefly introduce them, or they introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Juan Arturo Brennan, and I teach film music and film language at different levels here at the CCC.
Hi, I am Montserrat Algarabel, and I teach art history here at the CCC.
Hi, I'm Anais Pareto. I'm coordinating here the course of production and film production.
That's it.
And Michael.
Hi, I'm Michael Kennedy. I'm a film and TV director, and I teach direction at Sheridan College in Oakville. It's a suburb of Toronto up in Canada. And it's a 4-year bachelor degree program.
Wonderful. So why don't we go back to Frederick and company and what's been going on today?
Let's call it structured anarchy. We chose to go to a more of an ed camp model than a traditional conference model for this gathering, and we've spent most of our time where people have been divided into groups of 4 or 5, discussing particular topics around the headings: how do we teach, why do we teach, and what do we teach? With what do we teach being the final topic today. And one of the things we were talking about right at the end is how this particular format worked for us, using small group sessions instead of keynote speakers, using these kind of structured discussions, using Google Documents, where each group was given a link to a Google document where they wrote down or tried to write down what their main points of their discussions. And then we had a small panel sitting on stage, all cutting and pasting Google Docs into a Padlet that was shown live on stage, and also everyone had the link to it and could bring it up on their own machines and see what the other groups were talking about. Just as I was coming over here to set up, we had a short discussion, Anir and Francisco and I, about the different reactions to the format. It's been an experiment, obviously. And perhaps you guys would like to continue that.
Normally, in a conference, particularly in a conference that's regional like this, there are a lot of people that know each other from before. And what I found, being an outsider from the U.S., kind of being very at home with this group and not knowing a lot of the group, the notion of meeting 4 to 5 new colleagues in 4 sessions and having a discussion about serious topics and actually coming to conclusions that had to be put on the board and then further discussed and amplified was very useful to me. My colleague from Israel had a different point, and maybe I'll let him articulate.
Yeah, hi. Well, it's not exactly a different point, because I agree with the first part that you just said. And again, as an experience, it was a wonderful experience on few levels. First of all, I mean, as you said, the chance to intimate like 2.5-hour session to be with 4 colleagues from different places in the world and different backgrounds. This was great and was very helpful. And to learn from each other's experience, to share our own experience. But I think this method could be improved, because sometimes we found ourselves relating to questions with no context, like it was too abstract. So, and I felt sometimes that a combination of this method with a more traditional one of keynote speak or even shorter presentation that give us like something to work against, that we could discuss a specific example of an experience that one of the teachers shares with the rest of us could help. Also, I think that there is an interesting, on one hand, again, I mean, everything I'm very ambivalent, because a lot of things here I think was very, very interesting, and a lot of things had problems. I felt that the interaction through Google Docs, on one hand, that we are talking with each other, and at the same time we have to write it down, and then it is translated to graphically. On one hand, it was very, very interesting. And in a way, also, we experienced what sometimes I feel that our students are experiencing when I'm teaching them, I'm talking to them, and they are in their computers. But a lot of time I felt that when the discussion or the interaction between us around the table was really interesting and really deep, then no one wrote anything. So in a way, it never came to the graphic. And other times when we started writing, we were not involved in the discussion. Yeah. So also it's kind of, it has pros and cons, and I'm not sure how I feel about it. I mean, I feel great as an experience, but I don't know if it's there are problems with this format, I think. And also a lot of time, when I looked at the graffiti that even came from my own table, I found that, again, it's not always what's the important thing can be translated to graffiti. So, and the graffiti sometimes represented things that were said on the table, but not the most interesting or most controversial things. So again, it's very complex issue, these things.
So our solution was to use, in my first group, the dictation program, so that everything anybody was saying was just redictated, so it's put on the screen. That worked incredibly well with the first group. The second group did not want to expose their ideas, they wanted to come to conclusions. And by the end of the discussion, they were so tired
They couldn't write anything.
Couldn't write anything. So somewhere in the middle probably lies the truth. As I hear and have had some time to think about what you said, I think if the questions were up for us, like for us to look at, and we had an initial mic response from every table, this might actually give us your idea of a keynote, saying, you know, this is a difficult thing to do. I don't think it's possible or accomplishable. So we could respond to each of the tables and come back. That might be some way.
Yeah, I mean, there's also kind of work retreat model which happens in business, which I think is kind of useful, where you say, all right, quite randomly, your table is responsible only for talking about this specific question. And we'd like you to get quite deep, and then we'd like you to consolidate that into one paragraph for us to consider, because otherwise I think that it becomes sort of democratic in a sort of generalizing sense.
So have you seen the questions of yesterday? No.
No. Okay.
Looking for the unmute button. No, not all of them. I reviewed them quickly.
Yeah.
So just to have context, does anybody want to highlight what we discussed in terms of, you know, yesterday's, you know, from professional filmmaker to pedagogue, and then everything that comes along with it. One of these, this is the Trainers Reboot, was the name of the conference, and we discussed in the first session, you know, the concept of our mistakes. Is that a way students should be allowed the wrong way, product versus process, and so on. And do you want to introduce yourself?
No, I want to get Bert back because I have to go somewhere. I'm Ben Gibson. Hello. It's nice to meet all of you. I'm Ben Gibson from Berlin.
And Bert's running away.
Available.
Thanks, Ben. I was going to get you to introduce yourself. Go ahead with a summary of the Padlet contents.
Did you say to continue the summary of Padlet contents?
Yes, please.
Yes.
So I'm only picking and choosing. The second part was was dealing with moving from digital to capture new skills and new technologies. Is there a need to educate traditional filmmakers to meet future audiovisual media? This particular thing, which had a couple of other questions, really seemed to stump the group. We think it would probably be the most direct one. The first one seemed to sort of really get people thinking about how we teach, how we respond to students. I'd actually like you to kind of reimagine what your response was when we were asking whether the student should be listened to or the teacher should be listened to, who should be the master or the student, and should be reversing. You said something very meaningful.
Okay, well, I will go ahead and I will refer to what you have just said. We were talking about mistakes and many people responded. It was interesting because I think it was the questions where most people reacted to. That somehow the mistake things echoed to a lot of the teachers. And how do we allow mistakes? What's our attitude towards mistake? How do we give critique to films? And I said that it seems, if we are using the concept of the word mistake, it means that we assume that there is an alternative way to do what we call a mistake. There is an alternative way which is right. It means that we pretend that there is absolute right and wrong, and it's like the teacher is as if the teacher pretends to be God that know what's right and wrong and tells the students what's right and wrong. And I said that what I'm trying usually to do when I see a film, I'm trying to look for the scene or for something that worked best for me. That I felt that the film is I'm connecting to the film or to whatever the student is trying to do. And I said that for me, I start with this. This is my point of departure, and I show this few minutes maybe from the film to the students again, and I tell them, this is a scene that worked for me best, or from this scene I understand what the student is trying to do. So this is for me, this gives me the codes and so, to analyze this film. And first of all, I say, I explain to them why it is so good, why it is so effective, so I can also give some, show good things about this film. And then I say, for me, the student at this point, I tell him or her, you set up the standards of what's right and wrong. Why other scenes, or let's check if other scenes are consistent with what we did in this scene. Some scenes are contradicting this scene, or some scenes are not in the same standards that you showed you can lead to. I'm an audience. I expect the standard of the film to be the standard of this specific scene. So in a way, the film decide what's the standards of right and wrong, and we take the codes to understand the film and to analyze the film, to relate to the film from the film itself. And then we have like some sort of measures of right and wrong, or of mistakes or adjustment, or whatever, however we call it. Besides this, I just want to add that today, again, we're going back to this, I had this thought that the word mistake actually is a montage from, in English at least, it's a montage from miss and take. So in a way, it's a missed take. But all our work as filmmakers is constructed from takes, first take, second take, until we feel we have the best takes. But so in a way, to have the best take, we need to do a lot of takes. We need to have a lot of mistakes in order to achieve the take that we want that is right. That's it.
And well said. And one of the things that we also talked about was to create an environment in which students are allowed to fail, and we create a net so that they cannot get hurt in that failure, and through that, not necessarily label it as failure, but they necessarily won't be able to accomplish what they hope to accomplish, and we can sort of buoy them up so that they can try again. What my colleague just said is incredibly important, to sort of use the metaphor of the time machine as it applies to filmmaking. It's one of the few crafts in which, you know, you can get 9 takes, and on the 8th take, it's incredible. And you get maybe get a protection take, or you can get 3 takes, or you can get 1 take. But you can get other coverage that will sort of dimensionalize the sequence or the scene. And so I think if this whole notion of right and wrong, which is something that the students obsess about, and sometimes the faculty obsess about, just because of, as teachers, we don't want to be perceived as being wrong, is something that is really moves about in the creative process in a way that can happen only in film.
I want to add to this, because after the session, and again, part of this format, what's great about it, it's that we are talking after the session ends and regarding what we said during the session. So some people came to me regarding these remarks about the mistake and asked me what happened. It's like, you're very fortunate if you have one scene. Every time that a student show an exercise, you have one scene or one little bit that you think is excellent, and you can talk about the film related to the scene. And it's true, sometimes I see an exercise which is totally, I feel meaningless. Again, I wouldn't say mistakes, but somehow I feel meaningless. So what I'm trying to do, well, I'm doing 2 things. First of all, before I open my mouth, I ask the class to react and to see how the students could relate to it. And I try to let them, when they say it's a great story, I ask, okay, please tell me what is the story. And first of all, I want to see if some other students can relate to the film. So then we talk about it in one way, but if like no one, in a way also I tell the students, okay, let's see, no one here could felt anything or understood. So I said, first of all, the one thing I can tell you is, I don't know if it's bad or good, but I didn't understand your film. So now I can, first of all, tell me what you tried to do, and then I will explain to you why I didn't understand it. And then I finally said to him, okay, I didn't understand it. I explained to you why I didn't understand. Now it's your choice whether you care. Whose problem is it? Maybe it's my problem because I'm not open enough. Maybe it's your problem. You have to decide if it's my problem or your problem. You have to decide if you care with me, because again, I don't represent only myself, I represent other audience as well. So it's your responsibility to decide if you care or you don't care. And then we can start to talk about how can you fix or adjust that things will be different.
The other, as we sort of moved yesterday through the transition to digital, we also talked about censoring content, and some of us weighed in and said that sometimes the moment that you give a list of what needs to be censored, the students immediately are attracted to this rather than abide by it. As we moved today into how do we teach, one of the things that was talked about in the morning was the fact, sorry, why do we teach? In the morning was the fact that we have to have a passion for what we teach. We were talking about specifically about virtual reality earlier in the conference, and I said, if someone wants to teach virtual reality, ask them which their favorite virtual reality experience, and if they don't have one, they shouldn't be teaching it. In the same way, obviously, we would not want someone who does not like film to teach cinema. And so you really first have to engage and find something that is transformative and has moved you in a meaningful way, so that you can go ahead and try and find that in teaching. One of my colleagues at the table actually encapsulated by calling it a love of film. You must have a love for the subject so that this passion can somehow be communicated to the students. The other thing, as we talked about, of course, training the trainers, was the notion of moving professionals from telling their war stories into describing a process toward creation in the future. Because a lot of people like to reminisce and are somehow very engaging about what happened when they were with this person, and they mention a certain name or a certain production, and the students are amused or entertained, but very little is learned. While if they brought in a script and took a scene and broke down that scene and showed how they shot it and where it fit in the schedule, this would be much more effective for the students to understand how something was accomplished and how they could use these tools and these processes to accomplish that. I'm trying not to hijack this. So
looking for my mute button. Does anyone virtual want to jump in? Michael or Claudia?
Well, Joe said something interesting in the chat a while ago when you were speaking about retake. He said that it seems a bit like the teaching of writing, and as a professor of writing, I'll say that we have a lot of conversation about revision, and it seems to me that the process you were describing is a bit similar to the question of the role that revision plays in writing. And it's my claim that writing is revision, and I suspect filmmaking is retaking on some level. That iterative process is profoundly a part of the creative generativity of what you do and why you do it. So how do you teach such a thing as that? That's obviously what you guys have been speaking about, but it's a fascinating kind of parallel thought process, that notion of revision as one is going through a writing act versus retaking when dealing with the visual language that you're exploring.
I think one of the things we talk about here, and I know we're not the only school to look at film this way, far from it, is that the film's made 3 times, right? First there's the writer, the script, who may be working alone, might be working with a director and a producer, And then there's the production, which is what everybody talks about, and there's a lot of focus, and it's what costs money, and it takes time. But then the final time is in post-production with the editing and the sound, and these days also with visual effects. And at each point, the film is remade, it's revised, and each stage has its own ebb and flow and pitfalls and wonders.
I definitely agree very much. It's interesting because we never talked about it, but it's again something I always tell my students about this 3-time thing structure. But actually, it's more than 3 times because each time is many, many times. Because even in production, I mean, first of all, you have rehearsals with your actors. Yeah. You rewrite the script during rehearsals. Then, when you are really shooting, first of all, because of location and limitations or great new things that you didn't expect it but happened, you rewrite it, and then the retakes, as you said. But I think also what you said about revisions, it's very, very interesting that it's more and more true today when we are in the digital area, because now we really can, because shooting is so cheap, unlike in the days of films, we really can retake much more, especially students. I mean, when I was a student, we worked with films. We didn't allow ourselves to retake because film was so expensive. So actually, it's true. We are rewriting it all the time. Every time that we are doing it, we are rewriting it. It's very, very true and very important. But also, it has, your question, I think, has also very practical alternatives. One of the people in our table, actually, someone else that I wasn't in my table, told us that what he's doing a lot of time, usually directors want to edit their own film. So he said, I think in Lumiere Film School in Paris, he said, we allow them to edit the film, but then we also ask someone else to edit their film. And they screen in class, in front of all the class, both versions, the one that the director edited and the one that someone else, editor from the outside. And he said many, many times the teachers feel that also the class feels that the other editor, the strange editor, came out with a better film than the director cut. And it's the question, sometimes very rare it happens that the director admits and says, thank you, your cut was much better than mine. But definitely, I think whatever the result is, whatever the people say, I think it's a wonderful experience of retake. So this, for example, is something that came out in my table.
And a more immediate thing can also be, we have the technology now that allows for a laptop and a hard drive to be connected up to the screen. So when students bring in a scene to class, they really see it as being done. And you want to really teach them that in the post-process, it is that same rewriting thing you mentioned. And so by just going ahead and not recutting the whole thing, but just pulling a reaction shot over some dialogue, or doing just 4 or 5 cuts in front of the class, you can see the class react viscerally to how these changes improve the film, and then you send it out again. And then they see the opportunity that they can really improve the film. I think somehow when they have made the cut, they really think this is it. There is no other way. But if they get used to this, then they can come back to their mentor and have this thing bring in the timeline and make small adjustments, never doing all the adjustments for them, just enough adjustments that will get the fire in their belly so that they will go and want to make it better.
I would even further make this point, even take it to more extreme. It happened to me in class. One time I asked the students not even to change the cuts, just to try different music. Of course, I explained why. I thought that it's worthwhile changing different music. When the students sent it to me, I was so shocked, I myself, by the change of the visual as it seems to me, though the visual wasn't touched. And I asked the student to bring it to next class Bose version, and I showed the class Bose version. And I asked them the reaction. And some of the students were sure that the picture was changed also, though they saw the two versions and one after the other, and the picture was the same. And I took specific scene again, and I showed them how just a silent driving of someone in a car, which was exactly the same length in both versions, had completely different meaning with a different music.
Yeah.
So this again, I mean, here the digital area give us so powerful tools that we never had 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so we concluded the session this afternoon with how do we teach? And it had some very big questions about national cultural context, is film industry or art, ethical questions, and such. And I think that at our table, we realized that it was really kind of the creation of a visual story with meaning, which allows this sort of bridging between industry and art, because there obviously is practice and obviously there is art to this. It isn't one or the other, even though as a film school, some film schools might say it's all about the art, screw the industry. Some people might want to populate the industry with people that can work and make a living. But in reality, you know, it's a bit of both. One for them, one for you, and sometimes it's a synthesis. And so the problem as we kind of look down everything that needed to be taught is our programs have a restriction of how long they are. 4 years, 2 years, 3 years. And I went to California Institute of the Arts, and one of the things that led that program was no information in advance of need. You have to create a situation in which the students need the information so they will be open for it. Otherwise, it will not penetrate and be retained as anything meaningful. And so this, you have to figure out a practicum that will ask them to have those questions and want to know why point of view or perspective in the scene is important. What the difference between suspense or surprise is. Why should they be looking at German Expressionism because of the film that they're doing? And so to connect them meaningfully, I think, is one of the things that each of our instructors' roles are. And the one thing that came up earlier yesterday was, should we be brutally frank with our students, or should we be very sort of protective of their creativity? And it was suggested that it's a spectrum from the instructors in our faculty who are very frank and the instructors in our faculty who are very protective, and somewhere in between, and that the students can feel that they can access these in different parts of their formation and their process. And this, I think, was helpful.
I love the point you make there about protecting versus maybe aggressive, and the point about being done. And there's a whole thing about being open in the process there. I'm a computer scientist, so I teach a different area. But for me, it's really important to teach my students that it's not always done. There's the process to getting to a point is important, and knowing you can keep continuing. And I think that's where students are very, very sensitive to critique, because we want to critique because we want to improve what comes next. Whereas they're always thinking, well, this is the thing. This is the final thing I handed in for the grade. And I love the discussion about abolishing grading, and Frederick was talking about yesterday, because that's what I do. But focusing on process is really important. And so many of our students are just, they're not used to that. They're used to, this is the thing I hand in and I get my points and then I move on to the next thing. And how we react as teachers to that is very interesting. I love that discussion. I wanted to make sure that anyone here, two things. How is your schedule on site? I don't want to push you guys into like missing dinner or something.
We've got another little over an hour till dinner.
Oh, okay. I just want to make sure that we're not intruding on your time too much. Feel free to say we're going to leave, and open up the floor a bit to maybe Michael wants to.
Yeah, I was going to chime in. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, good. Fascinating discussion, gentlemen. Thank you very much for those summaries. I'm really interested in the that concept of the mistake and right and wrong, and of course I try to avoid those right and wrong phrases in my teaching. And the way what I try to instill in my students is cause and effect. Like I'll say, okay, what actually is this piece doing, or this shot, or this piece of music? What is the effect of it, on you or on your intended audience? And I can explain, well, here's what I'm getting out of it. And I think you were speaking of the same idea, like, okay, I'm getting this. Is that what you intended or not? And so nothing's really right or wrong. Just everything has somewhat of an effect, right? I'm really into them actually trying to look at it this way, because I find some students, some good students, they're a little overly intrigued with the ability to do something. Let's say, oh, one frame cuts. So all of a sudden you're getting all these flash frame cuts because they can do it. And I'm going, okay, well, yes, you can do it. What is the effect of those quick little flashes? Is that what your film's about? I mean, are these flashbacks or dream sequences, or what is the idea? What are these, brain schisms or something? So I really encourage them to analyze the effect of what they do. It also encourages them a little bit to get out of their own head, because you know what it's like. They have an idea, they shoot it, and they think, yes, it says it. And I go, well, let's see if it says it. Let's see, what is the effect of what you've just done? And I always encourage, for example, the class to respond to a piece before the maker of the piece gets to explain what it's supposed to be about. So those are some of my takes. And by the way, I really like this idea that someone just mentioned about the alternative edit of the film, because we work in conjunction. Let's say my directing class works in conjunction with an editing class and with a cinematography class. So when my directing students are going to direct a short piece, they have to recruit an editor from the editing class and a cinematographer, and make their little team. And then what everybody does on the piece is a contribution to their class and part of their grading. And I think it's a great idea, since we sometimes have maybe, let's say, too many editors for the number of pieces we're doing. I can say, okay, every piece we're going to do is going to be edited blind, in other words, without input from the director, by another editing student, which would be fascinating, right? And then show them the alternate versions. Love that idea. So thanks for that.
Yeah. México, ¿qué tal? ¿Preguntas?
Mexico? Claudia? They'll need to reach for the microphone mute.
Yeah, ready.
Okay.
Oh, hi there. Hi. Since I teach theory, not exactly film theory, but art theory and theory of the image, I wonder what's the role of theory in these processes which you have mentioned, which definitely have to do with the craft of filmmaking, but perhaps classes such as mine, which is art theory, deal with previous moments of the crafting of the film, in which students realize what it is to make images, and then go their way and make images. Does it make sense?
I think it works on. I think you should not expect it to influence the film that they're working on right now, but you should teach them to evaluate images so that later, once the film has been gone through creation, they can use those tools to see it. There is a tendency in my 15 years of Select to kind of sort of back up and be distrustful of this kind of film theory a little. In some units that are more worried about production. And I think it might be because there's a feeling that if we think too much, we will not take the risk to create or move forward. And so you have to sort of wear a different hat, just like we say in screenwriting and directing. When you're writing the script, it's one hat. When you're directing, it's another hat. And when you're directing, you think the writer must have thought, even though you're the writer. In the same way, when you take the film theory class, you must wear a different hat and be able to see movies and appreciate them exactly as you're teaching. But then when we take our directing hat or a writing hat, we don't necessarily put that in front of it. We put that to the side, we create, and then we put on the hat and we go, oh, look what I did here, or maybe I could do this, or this is like this. I think that these kind of parallel tracks in our process. Otherwise, everything gets stuck because it can't go through the one channel. Does that make sense?
I think we have no, go ahead. Yeah.
First of all, I'm both a filmmaker and a film scholar, and I write and publish books and articles, totally theoretical, and I make films, and I teach also. Well, I teach directing workshop or production workshops, and I teach also totally theoretical courses. But I think my image is not of different heads. Actually, the two metaphors that I have for this, one is maybe like to look as a juggler. Like always, one ball is in there and one ball is in your hands. So and you just juggle between these balls. And another way to look at it, I think this maybe it's more scientific even, though I'm not sure, maybe it's superficial what I'm saying now, but it's like we have these two sides of the brain, and in a way, the left side of the brain, the more analytical maybe, is more our conscious thinking, it's more maybe theoretical oriented, but our creativity is in our right brain. Now, but who said that we have to silence our right brain to when we are activating our left, or the opposite, to silence our left brain when we activate our right brain? So we should learn to activate our both. It's not different two heads, it's one head with two sides maybe. And we have to activate both. And I think also the way I teach, when I teach directing totally without any theory, when I don't care, I have these courses, what they study in cinema studies, whatever. But when I react to their exercises, I come from the perspective of theory and of my knowledge of cinema history, and I give them also examples. And the opposite, when I teach theoretical courses, it's not only, I don't analyze like totally in a theoretical way. I'm talking about like how that I show them that the director had, like, he was in a dilemma probably, and he had to make a choice. And it doesn't matter if he made his choice from a it came consciously or subconsciously, it is a choice. And if he would have made a different choice, it would be differently. So I think the same way that in my own experience, each side enrich the other side, I'm trying also to put it in my teaching and to let them understand it. But I agree with you, it's never anything that you teach, what you learned yesterday, if you're trying to apply it in a mechanical way to the film that you are just doing, it's ridiculous, it will not work. But if you learn about, you made your maybe first year film, and you just learned the theory of montage and about Eisenstein, and you go ahead and you say, okay, well, let's see if I can cut different my own film. And you experience by yourself the montage of whatever Eisenstein said about montage, and you see if it works or it doesn't work. So here, like theory can enrich the practical, even like right at the same time, but definitely theory gives perspective, and it will mostly, when it will be effective, as it influence your next film, the next year or whatever.
And to be clear, I don't mean that the parallel tracks are silos. I mean that you can skip between these as you move forward, and the more nimbly you move either between the left side or the right side of your brain, the more effective you are sometimes creatively. But sometimes you can't let both of them work at the same time, because then all of a sudden you start questioning yourself and you cannot move forward. And that was my only point in terms of keeping this parallel.
For me, it's often a matter of what do we mean when we say theory, right? I mean, I can't imagine a filmmaker, whether they're director, cinematographer, editor, that doesn't have some element of theory in their practice. But at the same time, we don't teach film theory in film studies in our school, and I've seen students who've come to us who have taken film studies previously, who are amazing and can use that material as raw material in their process. And I've seen others who become just stifled and get so caught up in the internal intellectual discussion around cinematic theory that they're unable to create. And it's a really challenging thing. And the other aspect is, yeah, cinema theory is important, but also art history is important, world history is important, psychology is important, sociology is important. And all of these elements should go into storytelling and into filmmaking.
One of the interesting things that came out of the curricular discussions last week was the notion of even narrative filmmakers should sort of be asked to do a documentary piece on the first year.
Mm-hmm.
Because some students are very good at copying, very good at interested in some sort of genre, but if they actually have to follow a subject and really find out how a certain person lives, and someone that is not their own age, they might learn a little bit more about character and about a human being and about struggle that maybe a screenwriting class can teach them.
Yeah, it's true. I think also part of we're talking a lot, the word storytelling was used a lot these 2 days. But I think one word that we didn't use at all, and I think it's as important as storytelling. Filmmaking is about storytelling, but it's also about observation, being able to observe, to watch, to look. And in a way, again, it's two parts of filmmaking: to observe reality and then to project, to be able to project whatever you observe without just copying it, because we cannot really copy. And storytelling is only then maybe, storytelling is part of the projecting what we observed, but first we have to be observers before we have anything to tell. Either we observe our inner reality or we observe outer reality. So a documentary many times teaches them much more to observe reality.
Go ahead.
Looking at the notes from yesterday, one of the things that struck me was that there was a little bit of discussion about the way that documentary opens questions of ethics or responsibility, which I think is another really interesting thing. It's one of the things I deal with a lot, as we have a lot of people who are interested in the presentation of oral histories or community media stories. It's another level. You've got a new, potentially a new collaborator or a new subject, which strikes me as another interesting reason to run straight on at the question of what is the, say, cultural responsibility, or what are the norms in the film community around telling other people's stories, and how does that inform your work, whatever you're doing. So I was interested to see that suggestion.
Mm-hmm. It's an ongoing discussion both in schools and among filmmakers. I think especially documentary and not docudrama, not in the least. There's been a couple of issues here in Norway in the last few years with feature films based on historical events that, for dramatic purposes, have rewritten certain key characters, and the descendants of those characters have been very unhappy. I mean, it's a huge ethical issue. What's the filmmaker's responsibility in that situation? The general, I would say probably the general practice in the commercial part of the filmmaking business is that it's the film, the story, that comes first. That's obviously a gross generalization, but that's fairly prevalent. I think in schools we have a greater responsibility to make the students aware that there are ethical implications when they're dealing with real material, whether it's in a dramatic form or in a documentary form. We talked a little bit in the groups yesterday about virtual reality. One of the discussions we had right at the end of the day was the effect a virtual reality environment has on the viewer, which from all early studies seems to be, not surprising, much greater than a traditional cinematic viewing. And what what ethical restrictions does that place on the creator of the piece? How aware do you have to be of the effect that this might have on a viewer?
Yeah, well, actually, we talked today a lot about ethic, about responsibility, and about censorship. Yes, no, why, and it all and relationship between the filmmaker and his or as teachers and the students to our community, to where we are located. I think all these 4 different issues they all have to do with responsibility and ethic. But I think it's much broader question than what we just raised, because it's not just, I think it's an artificial differentiation between a doc and a fiction, or what you call doc drama, because a lot of fiction films, they are related to reality, and we take our materials from reality. And there are different questions of ethics. There is an ethic between the filmmaker and his audience. There is an ethic between the filmmakers and his actors, or the people he shoots when it's a documentary. And the fact that actors are professional and working under contract and agree to do whatever they are asked to do, it doesn't mean that it frees the filmmaker from ethical questions. We have today a lot of examples. Actually, lately, we hear stories about Hitchcock, and just a few months ago, the actors of Hitchcock from Birds raised it. So we all the time, filmmakers are exploiting their actors. We hear a lot of stories, and it doesn't matter, like in neorealist films, they did it to real people. In Hollywood, they did it to professional actors, but still the ethical issues are very, very similar. And also, well, maybe ethic between the director and the producer, or whoever invested the money. So, and sometimes all this, and ethical, your own integrity, what do you feel about? And when you talk about, it's not just when you change reality or you change the characters. Who says that you change the character because it's good for the storytelling? Maybe because this is your understanding of the character. When we are looking at the past, it's our interpretation of the past. So, and what about when we're making an adaptation of literature? So I think and again, we are not to decide what's ethical or not, because by deciding for our students what's ethical or not ethic, we are in a way whipping them from their responsibility. So it's unethical toward them. But I think we should raise ethical questions. We should make them aware, and the way if they exploit their actors or not. So
one of the things that we talked about at our table in terms of this ethics questions, which of course are important to us, is the idea of it's best if the professors model ethics and best practices for the students, that the students get. In theater, it's very normal for theater students to watch directors direct, designers design. In film schools, it's very normal to just send the students out to shoot. And so if they have an opportunity or a moment to actually see you direct, or me direct, a script being revised, it actually allows them a peek into the process, something that theater students have done academically for years.
I want to chime in if I could, guys. You're covering a lot of ground, but quickly, it's quite interesting. I'm intrigued by your ethical discussion, and I agree that the documentary films often elicit that those questions more than narrative films. In our third year, all the students, especially directors, make a documentary first in the fall term, and then in the spring term, they dig into the narratives they've been waiting anxiously to make. I think it's a kind of an interesting setup. I want to go back one other beat too and comment on your theory discussion. When I was a film student, the best course I ever had was a second-year course at Ryerson, where they completely combined the theory and production courses so that every week what you were talking about in the theory course was applied in the production course. It was a miraculous combination that very rarely happens between two professors. And what I do in my teaching now is I try to make sure that the theory comes out of the work. So if and when a concept or theory arises, especially out of something observed in the student's work, then I will delve into the theory behind that. You know, I don't like just showing, you know, Potemkin and going on about montage unless I can find a way that it applies actually to their work. I took this one step further this year and I come up with a new assignment. After we discussed Kuleshov and early Soviet montage theories, they had an option in an assignment to make a 90-second short narrative where the first and last shots of the narrative were identical, but would be seen in a different light due to the context of the piece and what shot was around it. And that was a very successful exercise. They really enjoyed it and they did some fascinating work. And it was quite a challenge actually, just to come up with an idea that where the first and last shot could be the same shot was hard also.
Brilliant exercise. I'm already stealing it from my classes. Thank you.
How are you feeling there for time on your side there, friends? We've gone an hour and it's awesome, and I have no pressure at all.
Yeah. I'm happy to continue if you guys want to. I'm feeling the effect of it's been a long day. It's been we started at 9 a.m. and it's 6:30 here now.
Just want to make sure that if there's anybody that has any more questions, that they do get a chance to
ask. Yeah.
It's been wonderful, so just jump in. I think Claudia dropped off. It's frozen there in Mexico City.
Okay.
Does a symposium happen each year in Lillehammer, or is it a traveling conference?
It's a traveling conference, and GECT, the European Film Schools Network, organizes a spring and a fall symposium. Mm-hmm. And so the fall one, there's a different theme, different organizer each time. The fall one this year will be in Vilnius and focus on music for film and new media.
Oh, that's nice.
And then the next year's conference is spring and fall. I think the deadline is next month for the host of the spring conference, and after the summer for the host of the fall conference. So it's different theme, different way of organizing it, different country each time.
Mexico is waving madly. I think they actually they're there. Yeah. They're not frozen. Mexico, can you turn on your mic?
Adelante, Ciudad de México.
Hola. Hi there.
Hi.
I wonder if any of the proceedings that this chat is referring to, I mean, the work that has been done yesterday and today during your morning, has it been recorded? Is it possible to look at it so we can have more background, because we are sort of out of the loop on about what went on specifically. Is there any way that we can see and listen to the proceedings?
We haven't done any audio recordings. What we have are these docs, which we will eventually turn into some sort of conference minutes. That probably will take a few months to get that done. Mm-hmm. So at this point, the only recordings that exist are these two Connecting sessions.
And, I shared the Padlets with Claudia and her team. I was going to ask if it's okay to share it publicly or not. We talked about open process actually earlier in the discussion, which I found fascinating. How some of your tables were kind of, I don't want to show our process. We just want to show the final work, which reflects on our work with students as well. But I wanted to make sure before we share anything that we ask.
Yeah, I mean, we have I think in the different schools, we'll probably have very different attitudes towards open and closed. So sharing the Padlets with the people who are participating in this kind of conversation and are interested through the Slack channels as well, I think is fine. But I don't think we'd want to see them end up too public.
That's what I figured. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, Padlet, we don't own it. I'm not sure what Padlet's terms of service are because I didn't read them. But I'm assuming that means that they own the content. But
So have you seen Mexico? Have you seen the Padlets of yesterday and today's?
We briefly saw yesterday's.
So one of the items that came out was also collaboration. That this is not a single entity, and that there was a big plea to sort of get the students to value the relationship between their collaborators, and that was probably one of the biggest gifts that we could give them if we could come up with a process of sort of a non-dictatorial voice, but someone that collaborates and makes the experience meaningful, or at least tolerable for everyone. I think this is something that came forward. But feel free to ask us questions, and we will bring up things that have happened in the past 2 days.
I think this is wonderful. This is what virtual connecting is really about for me, that we're connecting people in different disciplines here. I mean, I'm way out of discipline with you folks. But then we're pulling in, I know Michael was just saying he was in San Miguel Allende and talking to the filmmakers there, and then Mexico City people got all excited and please put us in contact with them. So that's really a lot of what virtual connecting is about, is connecting these other people, for me at least.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic way to meet people across disciplines, but with similar interests. And also, now that I've met you virtually, Michael, I'm coming actually to visit Sheridan in September. I was talking to Ronnie Rosenberg just before Easter about coming to Toronto for a week at the end of September.
Well, that's wonderful. I'll look forward to you coming. If you time it right, you might intersect with the Toronto International Film Festival, which is on about the third week of September every year. It's very big.
Yeah, I used to work at the Canadian Film Center for many years, but unfortunately it won't be during the festival this time. I tried, but no go.
Well, we've got lots of stuff going on here that we'd be happy to show you. I'll look forward to your visit.
Thanks.
Any more questions?
Bazillions of questions, but I
Save
want to
them.
digest the Padlets again.
Yeah.
Definitely. I see
think
so
I-
much reflection on what you're doing with what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Excited.
I don't think I had put out the link from this morning's Padlet, so I'll put that one out on the Slack channel as well. Otherwise, I can just, one of the things we talked about today is we see this particular gathering as a starting point for creating both a continuing dialogue and networks, but also a toolkit for filmmakers going into teaching. So over the coming months and next couple of years, I hope that there'll be some more concrete both publications, other gatherings, and follow up on this.
Wonderful.
Well, if we're saying goodbye, Mia, Joe, Claudia, Arturo, Montserrat, and Michael, it's been a pleasure.
The pleasure's ours. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Also, it was a pleasure, and also in a way, summing it up for you was very important stage. I feel for us to
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's what always happens when I'm on site as well. There's great synthesis involved with these conversations. Yeah.
That's really part of the heart of why we do this, and connecting the people that are here that are only available remotely is so important to us. And thank you for sharing what's going on there with us, and being a part of the virtually connecting community.
We can obviously all be found on our websites, and in case of my colleagues, and I'm at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, UNLV.edu. Film, Francisco Menendez. Podemos hablar en español.
Thank you. Ciao.
Okay, thank you. And I'll close off the session here. If anyone wants to stay around and just chat, I'll close out the live session. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.